We'll now go ahead and build the ability for a user to create an account. So we can actually go ahead and register a user, send an activation email, and then actually activate a user's account. So we have mail set up, so that's not a problem. What we're going to do is go ahead and define the route that we need, and we're going to look at things like route grouping for things like making sure a user is a guest, so not signed in before they access the create account page. We don't want users that are already logged in being able to create another account. We're also going to look at cross-site request forgery as well as building our actual create form, which is going to submit back to another route, which will be a post route, to go ahead and actually register a user. So all of this sounds fairly complicated, but in actual fact it's fairly easy to understand once we get going. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to define the unauthenticated group. And what this means is it's a root group that all of the routes go within that need to make sure that a user isn't signed in. So let's go ahead and just define it, and then we'll maybe talk through it a little bit more. So we say root group. This is slightly different than saying root get, root post, or root any, in the sense that we are grouping other routes. So we're sort of nesting routes within here. And what we can do is we pass an array in here and also a closure. And what this will do is the array will allow us to define what we want to happen before, after, or anything else within the application. And these are based on filters. So let's go ahead and just look at this. So before, we want the user to be a guest. So where's this all coming from? Well, you'll also notice that we have this filters.php file, and this is application and route filters. And what this allows us to do is, if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see that we've got a route filter here by the name of guest, and that's what we've defined in. Let's just get rid of that. That's what we've defined here. So before any sort of accesses allowed to any of the routes we're going to define within this closure here, we want to make sure that the user is not authenticated. So if the author is authenticated, so we use this auth, which we'll be looking at later on, we want to redirect the user to this sort of / here. So that means basically redirect them back to the root directory. We know now that we want to allow a user to create an account. We don't want them to be authenticated, so we create this sort of root group, and we'll be putting other things in here as well, like forgot password. We don't want a user that's signed in to be able to submit a forgot password form. There's no need for them to do so. So this is our unauthenticated group. So let's go ahead and just comment these out, just so we know what we're doing here. So let's go ahead and provide a comment. So that's the unauthenticated group. Now within this, because we're creating functionality to allow a form to be submitted, we need to include cross-site request forgery protection. So we're going to nest another group within this unauthenticated group. Now cross-site request forgery protection, very basically put, is a form token submitted along with a form that just makes sure that the person submitting the form is the original person intended to. And cross-site request forgery is when another user links a user to a page or submits a request on their behalf, which allows them to perform an unintended action. So we'll be using cross-site request forgery protection within here, and we already have a filter set up for that. So essentially, all we're going to do is we're going to create another root group within here, another array, and another closure. And in here, what we're going to do is, instead of before guest, because we already have that, we're going to say before CSRF for cross-site request forgery. And again, what we'll do is we'll just place a comment here, just so we know that this is cross-site request forgery protection, like that. Okay, so we'll add a group onto there. Okay, so now that we have the unauthenticated group, within that we have the ability to define cross-site request forgery protection. Let's take a look at the actual filter for this. So this is the filter for cross-site request forgery protection. It will need a token to be submitted along with a request, and we'll look at that later when we start building our create account form. But within routes for now, we need to define two routes now. And this is the GET request to the create an account form. This is also going to be the POST request to the create an account page, and also an activate route as well. So 3 routes in total. Now the one outside of this is going to be the create account, and this is going to, I'll just comment this out. So create account. Okay, so that's going to be get. So we now want to create another route which points to the URL that we want the user to access the create account form at. So this is going to be route get /account /. So we're going to prepend everything that we want to do with a user's account with this /account and then / whatever we want the URL to be. And in this case, it's going to be create. So we're going to go ahead and create an array in here. And much like we did with the route up here, we're just copying this syntax exactly the same. We're going to say as, and this is going to be account-create. So we're going to name them as account- as long as it relates to the user's account. And you'll notice this sort of pattern as you go along. It's entirely up to you how you name things, but you know, it's one of them things that's preference really. And we're going to use a specific controller and a specific controller action. So in this case, we want to point to the account controller, which we haven't actually created yet. So we're going to need to go ahead and create that so we can create account sort of functionality within this. So let's divert and go ahead and create this account controller. Let's save this as account controller, so camel caps there. And let's go ahead and rename that to .php. So account controller.php. So what do we need to do? Well, we need a class of account controller, and this is going to extend the base controller as we spoke about earlier. And that's it. So that's our controller created. We now need to go ahead and create methods that are going to work with the routes that we're passing to. So in this case, what we want this to be is account controller at, remember with this allows us to access a method within our controller, get create. Now the reason I've put get create is we're also going to create another method called post create, which allows the post action to take place. So let's go ahead and actually define these methods here. So we need a public function get create, and we also need a public function post create. Now all get create is going to do is it's going to return us the view of the form that we need to show the user to access their account, create their account. When the user's filled in the form and they submit the form, that's then going to be sent using post data to this method. So this is sort of viewing the form, this is submitting the form. And the reason we're separating this functionality in this way is, in this case, we just point all sort of standard hits, get requests to this page, whereas if it's a post request, we can include all of the registration functionality within here. So we're sort of separating the logic into two. Now, just another quick diversion about the very verbose nature of how we're outputting the routes here. We can use things, cool functionality in Laravel like controllers, like RESTful controllers, and just defining the actual controller we want to use, and it automatically creates all of our different routes for us, or controller methods for us. I'm not using that simply because I like to output all of the routes in a very verbose nature, and this is for a few reasons, but couple of the main reasons is, one, I can see where things are going to very, very easily, and there is a lot more code involved. In some other Laravel examples, you might see things like the following: root controller account controller. And what this will do is it allow you to automatically pick up the get and post methods. You don't have to define your views like your routes like I've done here. But I don't like using this because it particularly for other developers coming into your code, it makes it really difficult to work out how your application, how requests are made to your application. So although we're going to be writing perhaps 100 odd lines of code in this routes file, it makes more sense because when another user comes along, they can automatically see exactly what's going on here. And also, if we need to make a change at any point, it makes it extremely easy just to update things. It also makes it perfectly easy to group things really easily as well. We can just do everything within our roots, and generally it's a lot more harmonious. So that's why I do it this way. You'll probably see it done other ways, but it's just personal preference, that's all. So with that aside, let's go ahead and create our account view, or our create view, which is then going to be returned from here. So when we land on this account, let's just close the filters. When we land on this account create page, what's going to happen at the moment? Well, let's go ahead and have a look. Nothing. So it's worked. There's no errors or anything like that, but nothing's being output. So like before, we could return like create or something like that, and you'll see that text being output onto the page. And instead of doing that, we want to create a view, and we'll go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to create a new folder within here, because at the moment we've got an emails folder and a layout folder. I want to go ahead and create a new folder called account, and that's just going to store all of the account views. I'm going to go ahead and create one called create, and that's going to be a blade template, and we'll go ahead and just put create page here or something like that. So now all I do is return view make. Remember, we dot separate, so account dot create, so that will render this view here, and let's take a look at what that's done. There we are. So we now have our view output. Now, the couple of things I want to do just before we get going here is, one, I want to add this to the navigation so I can access it easily using the navigation. So I'm going to go ahead and open the navigation, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to apply this here. And there's also one thing I want to do with this as well, is actually check if the user signed in or not, and output this based on, you know, their sort of status on the site currently, because if a user is signed in, I don't want to output the fact that I want them to create an account. So this is going to be create an account, and we will get rid of that just for now. What I want to do here is I want to do an if statement and an else. I want this to go within here, and I want this to be auth check, and that's just going to check if the user's logged in. So this area here is what's going to be displayed in the navigation if they are signed in, so things like sign out or change your password. Otherwise, I want to include links like sign in, create an account. So create an account is the only one that we've got so far, so that's fine. Let's just go ahead and define the link for this. So we know that within the roots file, we called this account-create. So we can do exactly the same as we've done with this. So URL root account create. And all that will do is it will link us to the create account page. So if we go ahead and just hit the root directory, we've got our create an account link here, and I click it, I go to the create an account page. So there's one thing missing from this, and that's the fact that we're not using the template. So we'll go ahead and extend layout.main, and then we'll go ahead and we'll create our section, and then stop our section, and this will be create page. So now what we'll have is we'll have this. So we've got our navigation. We can navigate between the pages really easily with our actual template. So what we're going to want to do now is actually go ahead and build the form that's going to submit through to post create. So we need to register a root for our post method, and that's going to go inside of our cross-site request forgery protection group as well. So I'm literally going to be lazy, and I'm going to copy and paste all of this and paste it into there. And this is going to be create account post. So we change get to post, and in here we change this to -post, and we change this to post. So the difference is that we're now using a post request that's still the same URL. We don't need to change the URL, there's no need. We've called it a different name, and we've sent it to a different method within our account controller. So if we go ahead here and return hello, Now this isn't currently going to work when we refresh because we're not sending a post request to this. But what will happen is when we go ahead and create our form, we should see the text hello. And obviously we don't want to do that. We want to create some cool functionality, but just for now we'll use that for testing purposes. So we'll go ahead and we'll build our form, our very basic form, and we'll go ahead and actually submit this and see what happens. So we'll create a basic version of the form. So we need an action and a method. The method's going to be post, obviously, because we want to pick this up with the post route. And in here, we're just going to submit this to root account create. And that should be it. In fact, what we could do is if we just get rid of post there, we can leave these with the same names. We can change them. It doesn't really matter like what we do, but effectively what we're doing is we're picking up this URL and then passing it as a specific name. So whatever you call this doesn't really matter. The only reason we're separating them is we want the cross-site request forgery protection to apply to post and not to get. So that's why we call them different things. But we'll go ahead now and just give them different names anyway, just for the sake of it. And we'll say account create post. So let's go ahead and we will implement just a submit field or a submit button, and we'll set the value of this to create account. Now we need to implement a token on this form, because at the moment what's going to happen is when I click create account, you see we've got a token mismatch exception thrown within Laravel, and what that means is that there's not a token within this form that matches the token generated using the cross-site request forgery protection. So here what we're going to do is we're going to use the form helper and we're going to output form token. Let's take a look at what that does. We'll go ahead and inspect this this form. You can see that's added another input field as well as the one that I defined. So that's generated an input with a name of underscore token, type of hidden, and a random token. The token now set matches one in the session. What's going to happen is when I click create account now, it says hello, as we would expect. Remember, we defined this within, let's just go over to our account controller there. So this has now worked. So we know now that our cross-site request forgery protection actually works. But what we can do is we can fully test it out. So if I was to inspect this again and change this, so let's just change this to just the value U, for example, create account, and we get a token mismatch exception. So we know that the cross-site request forgery works here, so we can go on to actually build the rest of our form. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and work on actually validating the fields within create that we're going to create in the next part of the tutorial. We'll go ahead and actually fill in all of the fields, submit this through to post create. What we'll then need to do is actually go ahead and validate everything, create the user account, send the user an email, and then look at actually activating the user's account. So we've got everything set up ready to go. We just need to build the sort of core functionality of this.